you guys have not yet read the book, Chop Wood, Carry Water, that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's from Joshua Medcalf. The reason why I like this book so much is because I mention this often. I am not the best reader. I struggled my whole entire life with reading comprehension, meaning I could read something and it would go in one ear and completely out the other ear. This book, I can really retain the information that's presented. I actually got hip to this book from visiting my brother down in Florida. I just surprised him one weekend, flew down there, and he had this book actually on his little coffee table. So I started reading it. I was like, man, I really, really like this book. I read like halfway through in the weekend. I liked it so much. I wanted to order a copy. And then I finished it, recommend it to all you guys as well. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys kind of like my takeaway and go over like my favorite chapters, some principles, and then I want to hear from you guys. So Brian Patton will go to you, Brian Boss will go to you, and then Mark will finish with you, and then I'll probably just do a little takeaway at the very end. So the big takeaway from the whole entire book, guys, is all about falling in love with the process of who you're becoming. It's very, normal for us to have goals, right? We all want to lose more body fat. We all want to, have more energy, have more confidence, build more muscle, or maybe when we want to have success in our careers. But often it's like we put that goal up on a pedestal and we forget about the simple principles and the foundation that's actually like what we're trying to mold and become in that process. And I want you guys to think about it like this. If you look up any of the stats, most people that like win the lottery, I think it's like 98% or 95%. It's a high stats. Within 5 years, they go broke. And if you think about it, like they don't have that money mindset in terms of like how to build that wealth. And they typically just spend all their money. They don't know about like savings or index funds or mutual funds or anything like that. They didn't earn that wealth. So that way it gets taken away from them very rapidly within 5 years. So this book is all about building up on the foundation, I like to say, principles. And for most of you guys that's inside of our coaching program, when you guys read this book, or if you're ever going to read this book, you're going to know a lot about what we talk about inside of Heartletics. It's kind of the same thing, right? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to say, hey, you need to do backflips and burpees and do all this crazy stuff, or try to shortcut the process. It's more so about like, hey, here's the fundamentals. Drink more water, eat more protein, get more steps in, lift some weights, focus on stress, get a good night's sleep. That's it, right? But during that process of this roadmap of you trying to reach your goals, you're going to get hit with a lot of adversity. We all do. Whether it's stress at work, whether it's stress at home, whether it's an injury, whether it's a curveball, whether it's a sickness, anything like that, right? Travel delays, anything like that. And it's more so about, hey, what is that foundation that we have, not just on our physical path, but mentally and who we're becoming to kind of handle these life's curveballs and roll with the punches, so to speak. So that's why I really like this book, because it kind of goes hand in hand in terms of what we're trying to coach and teach you guys here at Heartletics. Now, two specific chapters that stuck out with me that I want to share about, and then BP, we'll go to you next. The two is chapter 20 and chapter 12. So chapter 20 is all about bamboo. And before I actually read this book, I had on my podcast maybe like 2 or 3 years ago a YouTube video all about bamboo. And in case you guys don't know that, like Chinese bamboo, right? You have to go out there religiously every single day, watering it, making sure that the soil is nice and firm and everything. It's getting plenty of sunlight. But here's the thing, right? The first 4 years of that seed being underneath the soil, you're not seeing anything grow. And if we had to change ourselves with, let's say, that Chinese bamboo, right? It's like, hey, we're showing up, we're doing the workouts, we're hitting our protein goal, we're doing this, but yet we're not seeing that growth happens. But here's the best part, right? For Chinese bamboo, that fifth year, it grows up to 90 feet within 6 weeks, where literally you can see it growing before your own eyes. So I love that story, especially for myself, right? Like I'm just like you guys. I'm on the same path to just trying to, become the best version of yourself. And you're going to get hurt with curveballs just like myself. Whenever I'm getting hit with those curveballs where I'm not seeing the progression, I'm not seeing the growth, right? It's a great reminder to myself of, okay, hey, even though I'm not seeing, right, this bamboo growing yet, I still need to make sure that I'm still going out there, I'm watering it, I'm making sure that the soil is, like I said, very nutrient dense, everything like that, because underneath the soil, it is sprouting. Underneath the soil, there are changes. And that's why I always tell you guys, especially in the very beginning of, your coaching program here at Hertletics, is hey, what's going to typically happen the first couple weeks? You're going to eat more protein, you're going to do more strength training than you ever done before. And guess what? You're not going to see the number on the scale go down. But does that mean you're not progressing? Absolutely not. Hey, your metabolism is speeding up, right? You're putting on some more muscle. Muscle weighs more than body fat. And so, sure, you might not see the numbers happen on the scale, and sure, you might not see it in your progress photos or your body fat percentage yet. But give it what, 3, 4, 5 weeks of consistency, you start to see that growth happen. And it's the same thing when it comes to that Chinese bamboo, right? But the moral of the story is this: you need to make sure that each and every day you're going out there, you're still watering it. You're not throwing in the towel too soon. The second chapter is what went well, and this is chapter 12. And I love this one because a lot of you guys know, and BP, especially because me and you've been working on with the mindset calls. It's all about, hey, what is the story that we're telling ourselves, right? And so when it comes down to this, is hey, taking a second, I like to say, or a few minutes, whether you're journaling it, whether you're thinking about it, like how Jeff Cohn's mentioned, right? A self reflection. Maybe sure, like you had a bad day, you didn't get a workout in, you went AWOL and fed the bad wolf instead of, hitting your protein goal. But guess what? Like, did you tell your spouse or your kids like you love them? Well, guess what? Like, you did something right today. Hey, did you show up for work on time? You did something right today. So many times, guys, we are so hard on ourselves. And every time we're hard on ourselves, what we're actually doing is we're not building any confidence. In fact, like we're hurting ourselves more and more and kind of digging that grave of negativity, so to speak. So, this chapter was all about just having this self reflection. What are you doing right? Even though you think that, oh man, I'm so far away from my goals or I fell off track, I bet you anything, you're still doing a great job. But it's so much that, hey, we need to reflect that and actually embrace that. But that also helps change our mindset to where we're a little bit more positive. We start thinking about more things that we're grateful for. We start having more grace for ourselves. But at the same time, it's starting to have that winner's effect. There's another chapter where you'll find all about, comparison being the thief of all joy. And how many times is it, guys, that we see people on social media or we see even our own members crushing it inside the community group, and it's like, oh, I want those results. I want that. I want that. I want that. But we're forgetting that everybody is on their own journey. And we also have to remember that what you see on social media, that's just people's highlight reels. It's like, hey, no one's going to show the bad stuff for everybody to see. Nobody's going to be that vulnerable. So it's like, we can't be suckered into this comparison where, hey, we're constantly looking at them and trying to compare ourselves, because we have to remember that we're on our own journey. And having this little self reflection kind of helps embrace that, where you're seeing all the things that you're actually doing right, even if you feel like you're failing and falling back. Bet you anything, there's a lot going on in your life that you can be grateful for, and you can start to see that progression more and more. But hey, it all takes action, right? It all takes time for you to have that self reflection. VP, let's go to you next, brother. What I guess
All
was
right.
like your favorite chapter or chapters from the book, and what is, I guess, some good life analogies that you learn from it that just kind of helps you whenever you need help, where you feel it's valuable to kind of share for everybody listening.
All right. So you already hit on one of them. So my other one was it was either like chapter 6 or chapter 7, where John was carrying too much water and he tripped
Yeah.
and got all wet. Um, so the premise of the chapter was maximizing your growth through experiences. So not I don't know if everybody knows, but I'm in the middle of my big goal for the year, training for my powerlifting competition. And you asked me two questions yesterday during our mindset call. And one of them was, what's going to happen if you do really well? How are you going to feel? And the other one is, how are you going to feel if you don't do well? So, of course, and I said that, if I don't do well, I'm still going to be glad that I did it and that I went through the process. And so a lot of times we have this feeling that we have to do good. We have to do better than everybody else, where it's a competition. When actually life is not a competition. It's about you and your experiences and how you get through it and what you learn from it.
I love that, man. I love that. And it's almost like when you see yourself in the mirror every single day, That's your competitor. That's it.
Hmm.
Right? And it's not like a hard conversation like, oh, I got to destroy you and you're staring yourself dead in the eyes. It's more so of like, hey, we showed up, we put in the work yesterday, but how can we do a
Hmm.
little bit more today? How can we be just 1% better than who we were yesterday?
Yep.
Brian Boss, let's go to you next, brother. What is your favorite chapter or chapters or biggest takeaway that you learned from Chop Wood, Carry Water?
So two things. Don't remember the actual chapter number, but it was the chapter in which the sensei asked John, "Who are you?" And not what you do, but who you do. And I had to stop and really answer that, because I think too often, we identify what we do as a living as who we are. And that's not the case. So I finally have really just come down to the answer is I'm a child of God, and I'm loved by God, and that's who I am. So I love that in the book. And then the other thing was playing in the present, being in the present moment. That was towards the end of the book. Those are the two things that really stuck out with me the most. I did download the challenge because he's got more books out there, and one of them's a reading challenge because I enjoyed that one so much. You know, he even says at the end, read it 3, 4, 5, 10 times, and you get something different each time. So that would definitely be a book. After my son reads it, it would come back to be circulated around the family again.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a good book. I mean, I've read it like 3 times, and every time I read it, there's like something that I need for that stage in my life, for that season in my life that I can kind of pull from. And yeah, I love what you said about, who are you? And that's a hard question for most people to kind of ask themselves, and that's just like your value and how you're identified. It has nothing to do with what you do. And a lot of people think that it is. I personally, for myself, I thought that was me too, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm an online fitness coach or I'm a business owner. And that's just what I do. It just pays the bills, right? But that's not who I am. And so it's like I said, this book, you can always learn something no matter what season of life that you're in, it's going to hit you. Mark, what about you, brother?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little while since I read it. So for me, at this point, it's more about themes that stick out that I remember. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me or still stands out to me actually is something that I talk about in like the onboarding calls, when I talk to, clients who are signing on. And that is being open-minded, right? When John comes into this, he has preconceived notions of what his training is going to be, and he does not like when he's spending a lot of time chopping wood, carrying water. He wants to get out there shooting the bow and arrow and doing what he has in his head as the steps to get him where he's going to go. But what he quickly, or not quickly, but what he learns over time is that he doesn't have the answers. He needs to hear the right way to learn this stuff, to grow and to reach the goals that he's shooting for. And it's similar to like in the beginning, a lot of times we have to teach people why nutrition is not something that you can overlook in terms of training, or why protein is the important part of the process, in terms of being higher on the thermogenic food scale. People come in just with a certain mindset, and I always try and tell them, if you've done other programs, if you've tried other things, right, some of the stuff that we are going to tell you may sound counterintuitive. To the same way that John feels it's counterintuitive to not be out there right away shooting the bow and arrow. But if you listen, it's going to get you where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I love that. You hit the nail on the head, brother. And I like how you also tied it to what you tell our new members, right? For the onboarding calls. It's the same thing, right? Because most of the time somebody's going to come into our program, they tried keto, they tried low carb, they tried, all these different things. And so they're kind of brainwashed a little bit to believe it's calories in versus calories out, or, you have to follow a low carbohydrate diet. And then everybody on this call knows, hey, you're going to eat way more food. And what happens, right? You lose way more body fat. It's completely different from everything else that's out there. But it's all stems to about the mindset. Hey, be open-minded. Like this works. It's worked for, several thousand guys. It's going to work for you too. Just be open-minded to trust it. Because if you're not, hey, you're always going to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. A big a thing also that I want to talk about here is and I actually wrote this down, is like if you think about it, like with this book, it also shows the importance of accountability and support. So in case you guys don't know like all the specifics, I'll give a quick little rundown. Maybe I should have done that in the beginning, right? So my apologies. So John, he really wants to become this samurai archer, and he goes over to Japan to become one. And it's kind of like what Mark just said. In the very beginning, he wants to go out there and just shoot that bow and arrow, right? That's all he wants to do. But what happens is like his sensei is just making him chop wood, carry water. And he's like, man, this is stupid. Like, why am I even doing this? I want to shoot bows and arrows and everything like that. And he's doing this for months and years. Eventually, he goes to the target range. And like before they're even shooting the bow and arrow, they're focusing on his stance, right? And there's another chapter in the book talks about the importance of just like the small details, right? Like the inches even where, moving the elbow up a little bit can take that arrow and completely miss the target. So continuing on with the stance, going over that for months and years, and then eventually, hey, he's finally able to start practicing on hitting these targets. That's, very close. And then sure enough, he gets better at it. And then the targets gets farther away and he can't even hit those targets. And he's learning something during this whole entire process. But what he's learning is not just about like the fine little techniques and movements to, shoot that bow and arrow. He's learning more about himself. He goes through a lot of adversity. He enters this, competition. He compares himself to one of the other guys, Katsu, and eventually they get into a fight also about it. He breaks his arm, so it's like he's going through all the storms that we typically go through. Honestly, like, and so you can learn so much about just John's process, and you find out at the end that hey, he eventually does become after 10 years, right? That samurai archer. In fact, there was one part I remember it specifically where John asked his samurai or his sensei, Akira, he said, hey, man, if I stop chopping wood and stop carrying water and I just practice hitting the bow and arrow and practicing that, like, how long do you think it would take for me to become a samurai archer? And he said, 20 years, right? And so in the beginning, he kept on saying, hey, do everything we tell you to do. It's going to take 10 years. John thought that, hey, you can cut out a short, do these shortcuts. And what happens, right? It's going to take way longer. It's kind of like guys that go low carb or do something different, like very low calorie or, crazy fad diets or anything like that. Sure, they might get, see some results, but what happens when you fall off the track, right? And then you have to regain the weight right back and go through that whole entire process from start to finish. It takes a lot longer than instead of you actually doing the right things in the very beginning. So John learns all these lessons, but what I want you guys to understand is, my biggest takeaway, even though I already mentioned a few, is the importance of accountability. How many times did John want to give up? How many times did John say, oh, this is not for me. I want to go back home. I want to go see my brother. Like, I'm not good at this. How many times, right? How many times did John cry and, just complain? A bunch of times. Just like us, when we're not seeing the success that we want because we live in this Amazon Prime type world where we want everything tomorrow, right? It's not like we need to survive and have these primal instincts like how it was way back in the day where we need to hunt for our food. No, right? We are so blessed, right? And living in obviously the United States with abundance of everything. We forget also that like our goals and especially our health and fitness goals, it takes time. But this book is a great, representation of accountability because if Akira wasn't there, constantly picking up John every time he wanted to, throw in the towel and quit, he would have, right? There would be no Samurai Archer John. He would have never had the success at reaching his goals. So it just goes to show you like the importance of having the right people in your corner that's looking out for you. We talk about this all the time inside of our community group, and this is the number one way for success. Be present in the group, engage in the groups, join these coaching calls, do your check-ins. Like, don't try to just do it on your own because what typically happens? Everything might be great if life is great, but start dealing with one curveball after the next, start dealing with more stress. Eventually you fall off the wagon. And then you're kind of left there like, oh man, like it's that pride, it's that ego. Like, I don't want to reach out for help anymore. Like, I already fell off so much. And I often remind guys is like, hey, like it's never going to be like that here with our coaches, with our staff, right? We're always here to give that love, support, encouragement, even at times if you fell off for a few days, few weeks, it doesn't matter. Like we're always going to be here to support you guys because we understand that it's the journey, it's the process. And even if you fall, odds are there's something in the midst of that, a blessing in disguise where you can learn something through falling off the wagon, through falling off the track, where maybe it's, hey, I need to put the pride aside, or maybe it's, hey, I fell off to see that like maybe going low calorie or low carb or whatever the case may be wasn't the best option for me, something, right? It's all going to happen at the end of the day. It's everything's going to be intertwined where, as long as you just don't give up completely, eventually you will reach your goals. But this shows the importance of just like Akira being that sensei that always had John's back. How, even myself included, right? I need mentors, right? I need guys at my church that's holding me accountable. I need guys that's looking out for me. I need people that has been through the struggles of parenting and businesses, right? Like way faster and progress way farther than me, right? Where it's like, instead of me cutting corners or trying to do it all on my own, it's like I want to make sure that I have the right people in my corner that's just looking out for me that can kind of see those blind spots. So that's it, guys. Once again, the book is Chop Wood, Carry Water by Joshua Medcalf. It's written at a third grade reading level, and that's why I really appreciate it, because I can read it and absorb all that information. But it doesn't matter if your goals is health and fitness. It doesn't matter if your goals is your career. It doesn't matter if your goals is to have a more loving relationship, maybe with your spouse or your loved one. Like, you can always find something in that book to help you out no matter what season of life.